Tonight's story is called The Bubble That Waited for Her. Subscribe to stay on top of the next story and hear more peaceful journeys like this. Each one made to help you drift off slowly, gently, deeply. And before you close your eyes completely, we'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment below and let us know. Tonight, the stars were quiet. Even the wind, usually restless in the trees, seemed to hush. The world was ready for sleep, but Luna was not. She lay in her bed, eyes wide open, listening to the ticking of the clock and the tiny sigh of the waves outside her window. Everyone else had already drifted off. The house was still, but inside her, thoughts swirled like tiny boats in a storm, ideas, questions, feelings without names. She turned her pillow. She shifted her blanket. Still, no sleep. Then, something curious happened. Out through her open window, just beyond the dunes, the sea shimmered. Not like normal. This shimmer was round and floating, like a bubble, but not the kind you blow from a wand. This one was larger, slower. It pulsed gently, almost like it was breathing. And somehow, Luna knew it wasn't just a trick of light. It was real. And it was waiting. She got out of bed, not because she wanted to be awake, but because something was calling her, softly. She stepped outside. The night air smelled of salt and moonlight. The bubble hovered just above the surface of the sea, bobbing slightly, catching the moon in its curve. Luna took a step closer, then another, and the moment her foot touched the water, not cold, not warm, just perfect, the bubble drifted toward her. It made no sound, but she could feel it saying, "You look tired." She nodded. The bubble drifted closer, close enough for her to see a shimmer inside. It wasn't empty. It was full of glow, like a little piece of the ocean's heart. She reached out her hand, and instead of popping, the bubble gently opened. Not like a door, more like an invitation. And Luna, too tired to question it, stepped inside. At once, the world softened. No more wind. No more clock. No more spinning thoughts. Just stillness. The kind of quiet that feels warm instead of empty. She sat down, and the bubble slowly lifted. It rose, not into the sky, but across the sea, like a feather drifting on a lullaby. Beneath her, the waves shimmered. Above her, the stars blinked. And all around her, the bubble held her in a soft, glowing peace. It whispered again, not with sound, but with stillness. You don't need to think. You don't need to try. Just let go. So she did. She leaned back. She let her eyes close. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't fight sleep. She floated in it, like a star that had finally fallen exactly where it belonged. The bubble moved slowly, not rushing, not drifting without purpose. It was deliberate, as if it knew where it was going, but wanted to give Luna time. Time to breathe, time to rest, time to stop thinking. Inside the bubble, the air smelled like nothing she'd ever known. Soft, like fresh rain, but with a hint of warm sand and wildflowers. The walls of the bubble shimmered with changing colors, soft blues and greens. Sometimes a bit of silver, sometimes like melted moonlight. She leaned back into its shape, and it held her, perfectly curved to her small body. It was like the bubble knew exactly how to comfort her. Down below, the surface of the ocean shimmered, then faded from view. The bubble wasn't just skimming the sea anymore. It was floating down, Gently, slowly, safely. Like falling upward into a dream. There was no splash. No rush of water. Just peace. Like sinking into a hug that never let go. As the bubble descended, soft lights appeared in the water. At first, they flickered, faint pinpricks of blue and violet. But then they grew. Shapes formed. Soft creatures, glowing with gentle bioluminescence, drifted by. One looked like a jellyfish, but it pulsed like a heartbeat. Another looked like a ribbon, dancing in the current, trailing sparkles behind. They didn't swim quickly or hide from the bubble. They floated alongside, as if they, too, had been waiting. The bubble whispered again, not with words, but with something softer than sound. A feeling. You're not alone down here. The quiet things are always listening. Luna closed her eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd felt this kind of quiet. Not just around her. Inside her. The quiet that melts the knots in your chest. The quiet that feels like being held. Then came the reef. Not like the one from daytime, full of chatter and movement. This reef was asleep. Tall coral trees swayed slowly, like they were dreaming. Tiny fish nestled in the cracks, their tails barely moving. The water felt thick here, like honey, slow and sweet. Even time itself seemed to slow down. The bubble hovered over a wide patch of seagrass that rippled like fields in a breeze. It paused. And Luna understood this was her first stop. The bubble opened, just slightly, like a yawn. She stepped out, not falling, not swimming. Just floating down like a feather. Her feet touched the seagrass, but it didn't bend or break. It welcomed her. She looked around and noticed something strange and lovely. Tiny bubbles were caught in the blades of the grass. Each one holding something inside. A memory. Not hers, but someone's. One held the image of a whale swimming through clouds. Another held a child's laugh. One, just light, soft golden light that pulsed gently. And one was empty. Waiting. She reached for the empty bubble, and as she touched it, she felt something surprising. Her eyelids grew heavy. Her heartbeat slowed. The water whispered around her. This bubble is yours. Not to fill, but to rest in. She lay down on the seagrass, the empty bubble curling beside her like a sleeping cat. And as she breathed in, the ocean seemed to breathe out. A perfect rhythm. The kind of rhythm you hear only in dreams. Or right before them. The bubble above her closed gently. The grass wrapped around her in a hug made of light. And somewhere, far above, the moon began to fade from view. Because Luna didn't need it anymore. She had found her own glow. Quiet. Deep. And finally, sleepy. And so, the first part of her journey ended. Not with a destination, but with a feeling. This is what it means to be safe enough to rest. The bubble rested beside her now, pulsing slowly, like it too had fallen into a gentle sleep. Luna lay on the seagrass, eyes closed, her body light, her thoughts even lighter. Above her, trails of soft blue light drifted down like underwater stardust. No noise. No hurry. Just breath and the quiet music of stillness. She could feel her heartbeat sinking with the soft current around her, like the ocean was holding her in its arms. After a long while, maybe minutes, maybe hours, the bubble stirred. Not loudly. Just a subtle hum, like the sea whispering it was time to move on. Luna didn't feel startled or anxious. She felt ready. The bubble opened again, inviting her back inside. She rose slowly, floating up through the rippling seagrass, and curled gently back into its shape. As soon as she settled in, the bubble began to descend again, lower this time. Deeper. Quieter. The coral reef faded behind her, and something new unfolded in the distance. A space with no edges. A soft, open place where everything moved slowly. It was neither light nor dark, just still. Shapes drifted far away, but none came close. It was as if this part of the ocean had decided to stop trying so hard and just rest. The bubble hovered there, waiting. And then it whispered, "This is the ocean of almost dreams." Luna tilted her head. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. But she wondered. Almost? The bubble pulsed gently in reply. "This is where minds come to breathe. Before sleep. Before deep dreams. Here, you are still yourself. But softer." Luna looked around again. Everything was slowed. Even the light drifted lazily, like it didn't want to get anywhere too fast. She looked down at her hands. They looked the same, but somehow less sharp. Like her thoughts had turned into warm water, just flowing. In the distance, she saw something curious. A ring of light, like a doorway made of moonglow, resting quietly on the seafloor. The bubble began to float toward it. Luna felt a sense of warmth rise in her chest. Not excitement. Not fear. Just that deep, quiet kind of knowing. Something peaceful is waiting for me. As they approached the ring, the bubble slowed, then gently opened once more. Luna stepped out, her bare feet touching the soft sand that seemed to hum beneath her. The ring of light shimmered gently, and she walked into it. Inside, the water changed. It was warmer here. She was no longer just floating. She was being carried. By the current. By the light. By something she didn't have to understand. Tiny flecks of glowing dust floated past her, memories, maybe. Or dreams waiting to find someone. They didn't ask anything of her. They didn't chase her. They just passed by, like drifting feathers, offering their softness and then moving on. A slow, melodic hum filled the space now. It wasn't a song, exactly. More like the ocean itself breathing in rhythm. Luna exhaled, long and slow. Her whole body sank a little deeper into itself. She felt safe. So safe, in fact, she nearly forgot where she began and the water ended. That was okay. In this part of the sea, nothing had to be held too tightly. Everything was allowed to rest. Even her. The bubble reappeared beside her, waiting patiently. She smiled at it. It had brought her here. Not by force, but by invitation. And it would carry her again, whenever she was ready. For now, she wasn't. She curled into the soft sand, surrounded by the gentle roll of light and slow current. And for a time, maybe minutes, maybe longer, she simply slept. Not because she had to, but because she could. Because nothing here asked anything of her. Not even her thoughts. As the current rocked her gently, and the hum of the water wrapped around her like a soft blanket, Luna drifted deeper. Not downward, but inward. Toward that warm, quiet place in the heart of every dream. The place where time dissolves. And all that's left is stillness. Luna didn't know how long she had been lying there in the ocean of almost dreams. It could have been minutes. It could have been a lifetime. It didn't matter. Here, time didn't walk in straight lines. It curled like seaweed in slow tides. She shifted just slightly, and the water around her responded, gently, like it had been watching her sleep and didn't want to disturb her too quickly. The bubble appeared once again, floating just above her, glowing a little softer now, like a lantern dimming as night deepens. Without needing to ask, it reached out, not with hands, but with presence. Luna felt the invitation rise in her again. She stood, slowly, and stepped inside. This time, the bubble didn't move down or forward. It drifted sideways, through currents that shimmered like silk. They passed between curtains of light and silence. Beyond one of those curtains, a garden bloomed. But not the kind of garden that grows in soil. This garden grew in the quiet. Each plant was transparent, made of water and soft light, swaying in the rhythm of invisible tides. They grew upward and outward and nowhere at all. Luna stared in wonder. It wasn't just beautiful, it felt sacred. Like a place the sea kept secret, just for those who truly needed rest. The bubble whispered, not aloud, but into her. This is the garden beneath thought, where worries dissolve, where stories are untold, and dreams wait their turn. The bubble opened, slowly and silently, and Luna stepped out into the garden. She walked slowly, not out of fear, but reverence. Every movement was a ripple, every breath a note in the garden's silent song. And as she walked, the garden responded. One tall fern-shaped coral leaned slightly toward her. A flower made of translucent rings opened wider. Tiny creatures peeked out from between glowing roots, curious but calm. Nothing here rushed. Nothing here demanded. Even her thoughts began to trail behind her like sea foam, fading gently into the background. Luna came to a hollow in the middle of the garden, a bowl of smooth stones, shaped like a cradle. Without thinking, she lay down again. The stones were not hard. They yielded beneath her like memory. Above her, slow trails of light danced like lullabies. And beneath her, the ground pulsed with a rhythm older than sleep itself. The ocean here was not water. It was comfort. For a moment, Luna remembered her bedroom. The ticking clock. The restless blankets. The thoughts she couldn't quiet. And then, like a leaf floating away on a wave, the memory drifted off. She didn't need it here. She was no longer trying to sleep. She had simply become asleep. The garden hummed quietly beneath her. Or maybe it was her own breath. She couldn't tell anymore. Everything was slow. Everything was soft. She felt herself sink not downward, but deeper into herself. And in that space, where her mind once raced, there was now only quiet. A stillness so full, it glowed. The bubble remained nearby, its shape steady, patient. It knew. There was no need to leave yet. Rest was not something to hurry through. Luna closed her eyes and listened. To the rhythm of nothing. To the weightlessness of being. To the sea, singing a lullaby only the quietest hearts could hear. And then, she slept. Not lightly, not briefly, but deeply, with all of her. She dreamed, but not with pictures. She dreamed with feeling. Like being wrapped in everything warm she had ever known. Like remembering something before it even happened. Like floating in the pause between a question and its answer. It was the deepest nap on Earth. And she had only just begun. Time had stopped meaning anything. There were no hours down here. No clocks. No shadows to chase. Just a gentle now, stretched wide and welcoming. Luna slept, and then didn't. Not fully awake, not quite dreaming. She floated in between. And the bubble, her quiet companion, never left her side. It waited. And when she opened her eyes again, slowly, like petals greeting the first light, it opened too. There was no rush. But something in the water whispered. You've rested. Now it's time to drift deeper. Luna stood slowly from the stone cradle. The garden waved her goodbye, though it didn't really move. She felt it more than saw it. A soft pulse of thanks. A sigh of parting. She stepped back into the bubble. It sealed around her like the calmest breath she'd ever taken. And then they descended. Slower than before. Softer than ever. The water thickened now, not in pressure, but in peace. It wrapped around them like velvet. Luna felt her thoughts grow fewer and fewer, like candles slowly going out in a room where she no longer needed to see. And ahead, something vast. Something waiting. Not above or below, but beyond. It looked like a field at first, a plain of darkness stretching in every direction. But it wasn't empty. Tiny lights dotted the floor, scattered like stars on the seabed. Each light pulsed gently, as if breathing. Luna leaned closer, and the bubble spoke again, so quietly she almost mistook it for her own thought. These are sleepers' lights. They mark the places where deep dreams begin. She watched as a creature, slow and round, something like a manta ray made of silver smoke, glided across the field, circling one of the lights. And when it touched the glow, the light brightened, then faded. The creature drifted upward, wrapped in a soft shimmer. She didn't know where it had gone, but it looked peaceful. The bubble hovered gently near a cluster of lights. One pulsed a little brighter than the others, a blue that matched the exact shade of her favorite blanket back home. Luna smiled. She didn't question how the sea had known. She just accepted it, like a gift placed quietly on her pillow. The bubble opened, and she stepped out. The light didn't grow brighter, but it felt warmer now that she was close. It spoke no words, but she heard it clearly. Would you like to rest? Truly rest? With nothing to do, nothing to fix, nothing to prove? She didn't answer aloud. She didn't need to. Her body said yes for her, in the way her shoulders dropped, in the way her breath softened, in the way her eyes felt ready to close again. She lay down near the light. Not on it. Near enough to feel its warmth. Far enough to feel her own. The light pulsed slower now. And with every pulse, Luna felt a memory drift past. A summer day spent in the grass. A story read by a warm window. The first time she fell asleep on someone's shoulder without realizing. These were not thoughts. They were feelings. And they weren't asking her to remember. Just to rest inside them. Like a soft bed in the shape of a moment. The sea grew stiller. The bubble floated close by, but it, too, had gone quiet. Not absent. Just calm. Everything around her had slowed to a perfect rhythm. Even her heart. Even time. And in that slowness, deeper than stillness, Luna finally let go. Not just of her day. Not just of her thoughts. But of effort. There was nothing left to carry. No need to stay alert. She didn't need to listen anymore. She was already being heard. By the bubble. By the sea. By whatever dream waited patiently on the other side of sleep. The floor beneath her gently rocked, barely moving, but enough to remind her of being held. She felt the pull begin, the one that takes you across the final threshold. That space between awareness and true, nourishing rest. Her breath came slower now, like waves settling into the shore. And finally, at long last, she slept. Completely. As the bubble dimmed its light, and the sea curled around her like a soft night sky beneath the waves, Luna crossed into the slowest waters, where even dreams move gently, and nothing ever needs to hurry again. The ocean of soft whispers. Segment, where the water hums. Sleep had taken her, not like a wave crashing over her, but like fog gently covering the fields at dawn. Luna floated, not upward, not down. Just suspended in a quiet that felt too complete to question. She didn't dream in pictures at first. Only in sensation. Warmth. Weightlessness. The hush of something bigger than thought. Then, a sound. Soft. Lower than a whisper. More like a hum. It didn't come from outside. It rose from inside her chest, like a forgotten lullaby returning on its own. She opened her eyes, though she hadn't remembered closing them, and saw it. Not the reef. Not the garden. Something else. She was no longer in the fields of the seafloor. She was drifting through a space that shimmered like starlight trapped underwater. There was no up or down here. Just movement. Just light. Just quiet. But not empty quiet. Alive quiet. the kind that made her feel like she was part of something enormous and gentle. All around her, glowing shapes moved, creatures made of flow and flicker. Some had long trailing fins that looped like ribbons. Others drifted in spirals, barely more than a shimmer. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. Their movements said, "You are welcome here." The bubble was still around her, she could feel its embrace. But now it felt thinner, like a veil, still protecting her, but allowing the dream to breathe through. She drifted past an enormous whale, glowing with soft teal light. It moved so slowly, Luna wondered if it had ever stopped moving at all. As she passed it, she felt something strange. A memory, but not hers. It was a memory of singing, of calling across the deep in long, echoing tones. The whale had never spoken a word in its life, but it had sung every single night for 1,000 years. And in that moment, Luna understood it. Not just the song, the feeling of it. Longing, peace, patience. She didn't know how she knew this, only that she did. She drifted farther, and the soft hum returned. But now, it wasn't coming from her. It came from everywhere. From the water, from the light, from the dreaming sea. She passed through veils of glowing mist. Each one hummed a slightly different tone. Some low and deep, some light and bell-like. They weren't music. They were more than that. Each tone was a whisper from the ocean. A soft sentence written in vibration. You're safe. You've let go. You are allowed to rest. Luna began to hum back, not with her mouth, but with her breath. And the water responded. Tiny sparkles in the current drifted toward her, swirling gently around her face, her arms, her feet. They weren't magic. They were welcome. In the distance, the bubble shifted course, slowly guiding her towards something more structured. A ridge, shaped like a spiral shell, carved into the seafloor. It glowed gently, pulsing with the same hum she now carried inside her. As they approached, Luna saw something remarkable. Figures. Shapes like her, not sea creatures, but people. Floating. Resting. Sleeping. Dozens of them, all in their own bubbles, each gently held in the spirals of the ridge. Some curled up as if in bed. Others lying open, faces turned to the sky above, breathing slow. They weren't dreaming together. They were dreaming near each other. Quietly. Without words. Without noise. The bubble paused near the edge of the spiral, giving Luna time. She didn't need to do anything. She simply watched. A soft current swirled around the spiral, keeping it whole. Like a cradle that rocked itself. And Luna could feel it calling to her now. Not loudly. Not with urgency. But with softness. That most sacred invitation. Come rest with us. She felt her breath deepen. The hum in her chest was steady now. Her limbs lighter. Her eyelids heavier. She let the bubble lower her to a resting place carved into the edge of the spiral. It shaped itself to her body, perfectly. Not because it had measured her, but because it understood her. She didn't need to speak. Didn't need to think. Only to rest. And with that, Luna let go again. The hum became silence. The water stilled. And she fell into a second layer of sleep. Deeper than the one before. She was not lost. She was not drifting. She was home. Here, in the ocean of soft whispers. Where nothing needed to be said. And everything was already understood. Luna didn't dream the way she used to. There were no flashing images. No racing thoughts. No tangled stories trying to make sense of the day. There was just a rhythm. Slow. Soft. Reliable as breath. She floated in it, not needing to swim. She was being carried. The ridge behind her faded into the deep. The other dreamers were still resting there. But Luna's path had curved again, guided by a current even more gentle than before. It wasn't pulling her. It was inviting her. She followed it without moving. The way fog follows the shape of a hill. Soon, she found herself above a flat, shimmering field. It looked like glass, clear but filled with subtle waves. She looked closer and realized they weren't waves. They were memories. Not like thoughts. Not like something she could control. They rose slowly to the surface, one by one, like bubbles rising from the ocean floor. Each memory shimmered, glowed, and passed by. She saw a faint scene from childhood, a time she had fallen asleep in a hammock, safely tucked in by the hush of wind and tree shadows. She had forgotten that day, but the sea hadn't. It held it for her, softly, quietly, until she was ready to feel it again. Another memory floated up. A rainy afternoon, warm socks, a quiet song playing in the background. No voices, just peace. She watched it pass, not with longing, but with thankfulness. Each memory passed without asking anything from her. No explanations, no pressure. They came to be seen, and then drifted on. The bubble drifted lower now, closer to the field. Luna reached out a hand and touched the surface. Instead of rippling, the glass water calmed even more. A voice, not spoken, but sensed, rose up from it. You do not need to hold all your memories at once. The ocean remembers them for you. Her hand stayed there a while. She didn't want to move it. Not because she needed to control anything, but because for the first time, she felt the full comfort of not needing to. She was allowed to let go. Below the field, something stirred. A soft glow, round and slow. It wasn't coming toward her. It was rising. Gently. It took the shape of a creature made from woven light and current. A giant sea turtle, ancient and silent, drifting upward with no rush. Its shell shimmered with scenes. Flickers of other lives. Moments of stillness. Quiet joys folded into every plate of its shell. It didn't look at her, but it passed close enough for her to feel its presence. A presence that said, without words, even the oldest memories are still resting. Even they find peace down here. She watched as the turtle drifted past her, its wake brushing her cheek like a breeze made of time. Then the field began to fade. Not vanish, just dissolve into the deeper blue. The bubbles shifted. They were moving again. But Luna didn't feel like she was leaving anything behind. Each memory, each moment, was now a quiet weight inside her. Not a burden, but an anchor. She was drifting lower now. The hollow of nothing to do. Segment, the deepest quiet. The water here was different. It wasn't just quiet. It was the absence of everything. Sound, thought, motion, even time. A hollow carved by stillness. Luna felt it first as a weightlessness that was almost like flying, but without effort. Just floating. Not falling. Not rising. Just perfectly held. The bubbles softened around her like a whisper. It didn't push or pull. It simply waited. A guardian for the sacred space. She didn't need to close her eyes again. She was already beyond waking, beyond dreaming. There was no need for words, no stories, no memories, no plans, no worries, nothing, only peace. She felt herself dissolving into the water, not like disappearing, but becoming part of the slow flow, a breath shared by all the ocean. She was the sea, and the sea was her. A gentle current brushed past, It was like a soft exhale of the whole universe. The kind that happens after you have held your breath for too long. And now, you can finally relax. She lay still, no longer needing to hold herself up, no longer needing to think. Just being. The bubble glowed faintly, not with light, but with calm. It shimmered with the pulse of the deep ocean's heart. The hollow began to hum softly, not loud enough to hear, but deep enough to feel. A song without words, a song without sound, a song of rest. And there, in that infinite quiet, Luna knew. She was safe. She was home. She was enough. The ocean held her like a mother's arms. The bubble carried her like a lullaby. The deepest nap on earth had begun. And as she sank even further into this soft sleep, the first hints of dawn whispered on the far horizon. Not a rush, but a gentle promise. When she woke, she would carry this ocean with her. She would carry the hush, the soft whispers, the slow, endless peace. And that was enough. The rise to morning light. Segment, awakening in the quiet blue. Slowly, very slowly, a new current began to move around Luna. It was soft, a delicate pulse, like the steady beat of a heart waking from rest. The hollow of deepest quiet began to open. Not suddenly, but as if a flower was stretching its petals to greet a gentle sun. Luna felt the bubbles shift gently, cradling her like a feather on water. Around her, the ocean began to brighten. Not harshly, not suddenly, but with the slow unfolding of dawn beneath waves. Colors returned, but softly. Pale blues stretching like whispers. Soft silvers twinkling like the first stars fading. And a shimmer of rose light, like the edge of a morning smile. The bubble lifted her, ever so slowly. Upward. Not to the surface, but to a place between sleep and wake. Where thoughts return, but without their usual urgency. Where the heart remembers peace, and the mind is gentle. Luna opened her eyes, but only halfway. The world was soft, like a watercolor painted on water. The shapes around her were fuzzy, but welcoming. A current brushed past her cheek, warm and familiar. It carried the scent of salt and sand, the promise of a new day. Above her, soft shapes floated like clouds. They moved lazily, shifting and swirling with quiet grace. The bubble whispered, "This is the space between night and day, where dreams soften into memory, where rest blooms into waking." Luna's breath deepened. Her fingers stretched gently inside the bubble. She felt a smile lift the corners of her lips. Small, peaceful, unforced. Because she knew. She didn't have to rush. She didn't have to be anywhere. She was simply here. Around her, the ocean hummed again. Not the deep hum of the soft whispers, but a lighter tune. The song of morning tides. And as the bubble continued its slow ascent, Luna felt something new. A quiet excitement. Not loud or urgent, but a gentle hope. A whisper that said, "The day will come, but only when you're ready." And with that, Luna rested. Not in sleep, but in the calm space where waking begins. The rise to morning light. Segment, the gentle dance of dawn. The bubble moved steadily upward through the soft ocean light, carrying Luna with a calm certainty. Around her, the colors shifted again. Now, the water gleamed with hints of gold and coral pink, like the ocean was blushing to welcome the morning. Soft beams of light filtered down, reaching into the depths like gentle fingers, tracing lazy patterns on Luna's skin. She noticed tiny creatures waking with the dawn. Small fish with silvery scales darted through shafts of sunlight, their movements quick but graceful, like whispered secrets between the waves. A school of jellyfish floated nearby, their translucent bodies glowing faintly as they pulsed slowly, a slow dance with the currents. Each movement was peaceful and hypnotic, soothing like a lullaby sung by the sea. Luna felt the bubble rock gently with the rhythm of the ocean. She breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the imagined scent of salt and fresh sea air. Her heartbeat slowed to match the steady pulse of the tide. The bubble moved closer to the surface now. Luna could sense the boundary between the watery world and the waking one. She imagined the soft kiss of the morning breeze on her face, the feel of warm sand beneath her toes, the distant call of seabirds greeting the sun. The ocean whispered around her once more. You are ready. The world awaits, but you carry the calm inside you. Luna felt a warmth spread through her chest. Not the rush of excitement, but a steady glow of contentment. A quiet joy in simply being. The bubble broke through the surface gently. The sky above was painted with soft pastels, peach, lavender, and pale blue. The waves rippled lightly, catching the first light of day and sparkling like millions of tiny stars. Luna floated there a moment, cradled by the bubble, suspended between sleep and waking, dream and day. She didn't want to rush this moment. She wanted to hold the stillness a little longer. Slowly, the bubble began to dissolve. Luna opened her eyes fully. She was back, but still wrapped in the quiet peace of the ocean's deepest rest. The morning tide called her softly, and with a gentle smile, Luna whispered back, "Thank you for carrying me." The ocean had given her a gift. The gift of rest. The gift of calm. The gift of knowing she could return whenever she needed. And with that, she stepped forward into the new day. The sun was now fully risen, casting warm golden light across the ocean's surface. Luna stood at the edge where water met sky, still wrapped in the tender glow of the bubble's last embrace. The gentle swell of the sea beneath her feet reminded her of every breath she had taken during her journey. Each one slow, steady, and soft. Around her, the ocean sang a quiet farewell. Not a song of parting, but a promise. A promise that she could return any time she wished, to the ocean of soft whispers, the hollow of nothing to do, or the ridge of dreamers. Luna looked out at the horizon. The sky was a canvas of pastel colors blending into the vast blue beyond. The world felt new and gentle, full of possibility but without pressure. She took a deep breath. And with it, she carried the ocean inside her. The calm, the peace, the softness, all folded like a secret treasure deep within her heart. She smiled softly, because she knew the day ahead could be full of noise and hurry. But now, she had a refuge. A quiet place inside. A bubble of calm that would always carry her back to rest. Luna turned away from the water and began to walk toward the day. Step by step. Slowly. Mindful. Present. And as she moved forward, she whispered a simple gratitude. Thank you, ocean. Thank you for the deepest nap on earth. The waves lapped gently at her feet, and the sea breeze brushed her cheek one last time before she disappeared from view. The bubble had carried her to sleep, and now it had carried her home. End of part 3. Total story length approximate 12,000 words. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this gentle journey beneath the waves, please consider subscribing for more peaceful stories like this. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and say hello. Wishing you calm dreams and restful nights, always. Why the tide waited for her one night only? They say the tide never waits. Not for ships. Not for fishermen. Not for wishes whispered into seashells. The sea comes and goes on its own time. And the moon, watching from above, pulls the water in and out like breath. That's just how it's always been. Except once. One night. It waited. For a girl named Elia. Elia had always lived by the sea. She knew its moods like some people know their clocks. She could tell by the smell in the air when the tide would turn. She could tell by the sound of the waves whether the night would be windy or still. And she knew the ocean never paused. Not for birthdays. Not for storms. Not even for dreams. But on this night, the night of the 7th moon tide, something was different. The waves came in and didn't pull back. The sea stood still. And it waited. It started softly. Elia had walked down to the shore just after sunset, as she often did. The sky was still glowing, a slow fade from gold to lavender to deep blue. She carried a small lantern. Not because she needed it, but because she liked the way its light danced on the water. She walked where the sand was still warm from the sun. She listened to the hush of the evening. And then, she noticed something strange. The waves had stopped. Not frozen. Not gone. Just holding. Like a breath taken in. Waiting. Elia crouched at the water's edge. She expected it to roll in further, as it always did. She expected the tide to greet her toes and pull back with a sigh. But it didn't move. The line where sea met sand stayed still. Perfectly, quietly, completely still. And then the lantern flickered. Not out of wind, there was none. Not out of fear, the night was calm. It flickered because something had shifted in the air. A hush beneath the hush. A voice that wasn't sound. A presence. She stepped into the water. It should have moved. But it didn't. It wrapped around her ankles like silk. No resistance. No chill. No weight. Only welcome. And somewhere beneath the surface, something glowed. Just faintly. Like a thought you're about to remember. She followed it. With each step, the world softened. The stars above grew larger, as if they had drifted closer. The moon glowed not just in the sky, but below the water too. She was no longer walking. She was floating. The ocean beneath her had formed a path, smooth, quiet, aglow with sea glass light. It led her to a place she'd never seen before. An island of stillness, just offshore. At the center of this quiet place was a shell. Not small. Not ordinary. A shell large enough to sit in. A shell with patterns that swirled like maps of distant dreams. She sat inside. And the sea began to hum. Not music. Not voice. Just a sound like memory returning. And then, finally, the tide spoke. It didn't use words. It showed her. She saw visions in the water. The first time she heard a lullaby. The time she sat in her grandmother's lap and learned how to fold paper boats. The quiet moment when she forgave someone without needing to say anything. All the soft things that make us who we are. Things we forget. But the ocean remembers. And that's why it had waited. Not for a moment. Not for a miracle. For her. To return to herself. The tide had carried these memories for her. Gently. Because sometimes we let go of parts of ourselves without knowing. And sometimes, when the time is right, the sea returns them. Elia sat in the shell as wave after wave of memory unfolded. Not crashing. Not loud. Just wave after wave of peace. Time passed, but she didn't notice. Because here, there was no clock. Only calm. The kind of calm that lives beneath thought. The kind that holds you when everything else lets go. Eventually, the sea exhaled. The tide, having waited long enough, began to pull back. Not rushing. Just resuming. Elia stood. The water embraced her once more, then began to recede. Not away from her, but around her, leaving behind only the softest ripple of song. She returned to shore. The sand was cool beneath her feet. The stars were quiet in the sky. The tide, once still, moved again, just as it always had. But Elia was different. Not because she had changed, but because something had returned. A softness. A slowness. A song inside her bones. She walked home without hurry. Her lantern still glowed, though she didn't need its light. She knew the way, and though no one saw it happen, that night the sea paused. Not for history, not for glory, just for one quiet girl who needed time to remember her own rhythm. So if you ever walk by the shore and notice the tide hesitate, just for a breath, just for a moment, wait. The sea might be listening, and it may be your turn to be remembered, to be returned, to be waited for. The sea had returned to its rhythm. Waves came, waves went. The tide no longer waited. It breathed as it always had, steady and sure. But for Elia, something lingered. Not in her hands, in her chest. A warmth, a hush, a stillness she carried home from that night on the shore. She moved slower now, not out of sadness, out of presence, as though she walked with the sea beside her, even when her feet touched dry land. She began to notice things, tiny shifts in the wind, the way shells would appear near her window, even though she lived far from the water. And one night, just before sleep, she found something resting on her windowsill. A piece of driftwood. Smooth, salt-worn, shaped like a crescent moon. It hadn't been there before. She hadn't placed it there. But she wasn't surprised. She picked it up. It was warm. And she knew, without question, the sea wasn't finished. That night, her dreams returned her to the shore. But this time, there were no lanterns, no glowing paths, no giant shelf. Only the driftwood, now grown large, standing upright like a gate in the sand. It swayed with the breeze, even though it was rooted in nothing. And hanging from its arch was a single chime. One note, one sound, ringing in the quiet. She stepped through it. The world on the other side was still the ocean, but not the one she knew. The sky here shimmered with moving constellations, as though the stars themselves were swimming. And below her feet, the sand shifted in patterns. Waves, yes, but also stories. Stories written not in letters, but in movement. Elia watched, and the stories revealed themselves. A girl who learned to breathe underwater by listening instead of trying. A sea lion who carried forgotten names on its back. A child who built sandcastles for invisible friends, and found they weren't imaginary at all. And through it all, the same feeling echoed. Return. Remember. Rest. Elia drifted further in. The ocean opened like a book. No pages. Just memories. Soft, wordless moments that didn't need explanation. And then, in the deepest place, she saw them. Others. Sleepers. Not people she recognized, but souls. Floating in calm. Each resting in a cradle made of kelp and starlight. Each breathing with the rhythm of the sea. And above each sleeper, a piece of driftwood. Different shapes. Different sizes. But all glowing faintly. Waiting. Elia understood. These were gifts. Not from the sea. From the tide itself, the part of the ocean that carries time. And the driftwood? A marker. A symbol that the tide had paused for them, too. Just once. Just long enough. So they could be remembered. So they could rest. So they could return. She drifted past them. Not to disturb. Just to witness. And as she did, the sea hummed again. A slow, familiar sound. The same sound she heard the night the tide waited for her. But this time, it wasn't just outside her. It was inside her. A note she could carry. A rhythm that lived in her bones. She returned through the driftwood gate. And found herself on the shore once more. The tide moved now. As it always had. But she no longer feared its motion. Because she understood. The sea does not forget. Even when it moves on. Even when it pulls away. It always remembers where it paused. And it always returns, in time, for those who need it most. Ellie awoke with the driftwood still in her hands. No longer glowing. Just there. But that was enough. Because she knew the truth now. The tide does wait. Not for long. Not for many. But once in a while, for those who are quiet enough to hear the hush beneath the waves. It waits. And when it does, it brings not answers, but rest. The kind that returns you to yourself. The kind that holds you long enough to let go. So if you ever feel the pull, a pause in the tide, a hush in the world, follow it. Step through the gate. And listen. Because sometimes the sea isn't coming or going. Sometimes it's waiting. For you. There is a place the sea rarely shows. Not even to sailors. Not even to the moon. It's deeper than death. Quieter than silence. Softer than time. It's called the Driftfold. And it's where the sleepers lie. Not dreaming. Not lost. Just resting. Held. And Elia had seen it. Only for a moment. Just long enough. But that moment had changed her. She didn't speak of it in the waking world. Not because it wasn't real, but because it felt like a secret shared between her and the tide. Something given in trust. Still, every night she returned to the water's edge. She didn't expect it to wait for her again. But she hoped, gently. Not with wanting. With wonder. And one night, when the wind was warm and the moon hung low over the horizon, it happened again. The hush. The shimmer. And the pull. This time, the driftwood gate was already open. She stepped through without hesitation. The water welcomed her again, not wet, not heavy. Just familiar. And as she drifted downward, the ocean around her began to glow in soft pulses. Like a heartbeat. Like breathing. The rhythm of something living. Something listening. The sea was alive, not just in motion. In memory. She passed the sleepers again. The cradles of seaweed and starlight. But now, she saw them more clearly. Each one held not just a dreamer, but a story. Projected gently above them, like mist shaped by memory. She floated closer to one, boy, perhaps, with hair that moved like shadow. Above him, a scene played. A lighthouse on a cliff. A bell that never rang. A letter never sent. The sleeper stirred. Not to wake. Just to remember. Elia moved to another. An elder wrapped in layers of glowing sand. Above her cradle, a beach she had walked every day for 60 years. But this time, the footprints she'd left were still visible. Still walking. Still moving. The sea had kept them. It kept everything. The tide wasn't just water. It was the record. Of every breath. Every pause. Every moment you thought was gone. Elia drifted among them, quietly. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't lonely. She felt returned. As if she, too, had been here once, long ago, in another sleep, another self, and the sea had simply brought her home again. And then she heard it. Not the sea. Not the song. A voice. Small. Clear. Calling her name. She turned. There, at the edge of the driftfold, a child stood. She couldn't have been more than 6. Hair tangled from the salt. Eyes wide, like she had been waiting for Elia for a very long time. She held something in her hands. A piece of driftwood, shaped like a circle. And inside the circle, something glowing. A tiny shell. Still humming. Elia drifted toward her. The child didn't speak with her mouth. She didn't need to. You dropped this. The shell was Elia's. Not from the first dream. From long before. She hadn't remembered it until now. But the moment she touched it, memory bloomed. She saw herself as a child, waiting in the tide, finding the shell, holding it to her ear, smiling as it sang. She had fallen asleep in the sand, clutching it, and it had been washed away. She had cried. She had forgotten. But the sea had not. It had carried the shell, protected it, held it, for years. And now, it returned it. Through a child. Through a memory. Through a dream. The child reached up and gently placed the shell against Elia's chest. It melted into light. And then into warmth. And then into stillness. And Elia felt the whole sea sigh. The driftwood pulsed once, slowly, deeply. As if the tide had completed a circle. And Elia was whole. She drifted upward. Not rushed. Just released. The driftwood dimmed behind her. The tide moved again. The sea resumed its breath. And Elia returned to shore. She woke with a shell beside her pillow. It didn't hum. It didn't glow. It simply rested there. Quiet. As if to say, you don't have to listen every night. You don't have to wait at the water's edge. Because what you were looking for, the hush, the rhythm, the return, is already inside you. The tide found you once, and it will again, whenever you're ready to remember. So if you ever feel lost, if the world is too loud, or your heart too heavy, look to the water. Even if it seems to move on. Even if it forgets your footprints. Know this. The tide is listening. And somewhere beneath the waves, your own cradle of starlight waits. Still holding your story. Still keeping your name. Still ready to carry you back home. The sea turtle that never stopped swimming in her dreams. She didn't remember how the dream began. Only that it always started the same way. With the sound of water. A rhythm like breathing. And a shape moving just beyond the light. A sea turtle. Always the same one. Graceful. Silent. Swimming. Not toward her. Not away from her. Just swimming. Like it had somewhere to go. And time to get there. Every night, she'd watch it. At first, from a distance. Then, as nights passed, closer. Not chasing. Just keeping pace. Like a quiet companion drifting alongside her thoughts. She didn't know its name. She didn't know where it came from. But in her dreams, it was always there. Swimming forward. Never hurrying. Never stopping. And always, somehow, waiting for her to follow. In the waking world, her name was Mina. She was quiet. Not shy, just slow to speak. Like the turtle. She liked things that moved gently. Clouds. Wind. The curl of waves on sand. She felt out of place in a world that rushed. That counted every second. That needed answers. But in her dreams, she didn't need to be anything but there. With the turtle. Floating. Breathing. Watching. It was on the 7th night that things began to change. The turtle paused. Just once. In all the dreams, it had never stopped swimming. But now, it hovered in place. And slowly turned its head. Its eyes met hers. And even though no words were spoken, she felt something pass between them. A quiet question. Not in language. In knowing. And in that moment, she understood. It was time to follow. Not beside. But deeper. The water shifted. Light streamed in from above. dappling the sand below. The turtle swam downward. She followed, not with effort, with trust. They drifted past forests of kelp that swayed like dancers in sleep. They passed rocks that hummed softly, holding stories written in the currents. Deeper still, the color of the water changed, from clear to sapphire, from sapphire to deep velvet blue. And finally, they arrived. A grove of sea grass, lit from below by glowing shells. In the center, a ring of stones. Ancient, smoothed by time and memory. The turtle circled once, twice, and then stopped. Mina floated above it, watching. And then, very gently, the turtle reached down with its flipper and touched the sand. The stones shifted. And something rose. A memory. Not just hers. Older. Whiter. A child on a beach, long ago. Laying a tiny turtle hatchling into the sea. Wishing it well. Saying goodbye. But the goodbye had never ended. Because that turtle had kept swimming. Not lost. Not gone. Just remembering. And returning. Night by night. Dream by dream. Mina's chest filled with something like warmth and sadness at once. A memory she didn't know she'd forgotten. She had released that turtle into the sea when she was 5. She remembered its tiny shell. Its slow blink. Her whispered words. Swim far. Swim safe. Come back if you can. And somehow, it had. The dream shifted. Now she was sitting on the shore again. The waves were quiet. The sun was rising. And just beyond the tide line, a shape appeared. Slow. Familiar. Steady. The turtle. Older now. Weathered. Beautiful. It crawled toward her. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She only waited. And when it reached her feet, it rested its head gently against her knee. Not needing anything. Just home. She reached down and touched its shell. And in that moment, she felt it all. The long swim. The storms it had passed through. The quiet nights it had floated alone. The stars it had followed. The dreams it had carried. And she understood why it never stopped swimming. Not to escape. Not to search. But to remember the way back. To her. That night, the dream didn't end with waking. When Mina opened her eyes, she felt different. Not in her body. In her rhythm. Slower. Surer. Like the tide. Like the turtle. The world still moved fast. But she didn't have to. Because she had remembered something important. You don't have to chase life. You only have to follow your own current. And trust that what's meant for you will swim beside you. Even in dreams. Now, every night, she dreams again. Not always of the turtle. Sometimes it's a tadpole. Sometimes a shell. Sometimes a song hummed underwater. But the feeling is always the same. Stillness. Presence. Return. The turtle doesn't swim every night now. Because it doesn't need to. It knows she remembers. And sometimes, remembering is the most restful thing of all. So if you ever close your eyes and see something swimming quietly in the distance, don't be afraid to follow. Not to chase. Not to fix. Just to witness. Because some dreams are not there to change you. They're there to carry you back. To the part of you that already knows how to rest. It began with a sound. Not sharp. Not loud. Just soft. Like a hum in the heart of the sea. Like a note remembered long after the music fades. Mina heard it one night, not through her ears, but in the space behind her thoughts. It called gently. Patiently. Like it had been calling for a very long time. And this time, she was ready to follow. She drifted into sleep the way a shell sinks in calm water. No resistance. No hurry. And when the dream opened, the turtle was not there. But she wasn't afraid. Because something else was waiting. A shimmer in the distance. A pulsing light. A song, deep and low, calling her toward it. She followed. The water around her glowed pale blue. Tiny stars of plankton sparkled in every current. The ocean no longer felt like a place. It felt like a memory. And all around her, the coral reefs began to rise. Not sharp or tangled. Soft. Formed in curves and spirals, like the shape of voices when they sing. And they were singing. Not with words, but with warmth. As she floated through the coral, each sheet lit up as she passed. One note, then another, then a chord. It was a melody, but not from her. It came from her presence, as if the reef remembered her. As if it had been waiting to finish a song that could only be completed when she returned. And now that she was here, the harmony unfolded. Gently. In the center of the reef was a dome. A shell grown large, open at the top like a sky window. She swam into it. The sound deepened. The reef around her shimmered with a glow the color of old moonlight. And from the base of the coral, shapes began to form. Not sea creatures. Not plants. Memories. She saw herself, younger again. Sitting by a tide-pool, singing to no one. Just singing. Because it felt good to let the sound out. A made-up song. A child's melody. Forgotten in the waking world. But not here. The coral had kept it. It had held that song, humming it quietly to itself every night beneath the waves. Waiting. Not to be heard. To be remembered. She floated still. Listening. And in that quiet, more songs rose. Not just hers. Songs from others. A lullaby a sailor had once whistled in fog. A tune a mother had hummed while collecting shells. A rhythm tapped on the side of a boat by a child who dreamed of islands. All of them kept. All of them loved. All of them still singing. The reef was a library. Not of books. Of emotion. Of presence. Of echoes too soft for the surface world. It had collected not knowledge, but feelings. Feelings people forgot they'd had. Mina touched the coral gently. It pulsed. And a voice, not hers, not the reef's, said softly. You sang when you were afraid. You sang when you were whole. We remember both. And we keep them safe. Mina let herself float down into the center of the dome. She lay back. And the coral shaped itself into a bed beneath her, not solid, not cold. Just soft enough to feel held. Above her, the water swirled in slow spirals. And the reef began to hum once more. This time, not a melody from the past, but a new one. A song made in the moment. Created just for her. From the calm in her chest. From the breath in her body. From the rhythm of her own becoming. Time passed, but it didn't feel like waiting. It felt like unfolding. Each note another layer of who she was returning gently to the surface. And when the song faded, she didn't feel sad. Because it hadn't ended. It had simply finished this verse. And when she woke, the melody stayed. Not in her ears. In her breath. She carried it with her through the day. No one else heard it. But she didn't need them to. It was hers. Like a secret gift the sea had wrapped in coral and silence in time. A song that reminded her. You do not need to be loud to be known. You do not need to be seen to be remembered. Sometimes the sea holds your smallest sound and sings it back when the world forgets. So if you ever lie awake, wondering if the quiet things you do still matter, know this. The coral is listening. The ocean is keeping your songs, and they are never lost, only resting until you return, and the reef sings you home. Good night. Some dreams begin with sound, others with light, but this one began with a feeling, a quiet pull, not urgent, not loud, just a soft tug from somewhere deep inside, as if something was asking, "Are you ready to remember again?" And Mina, calm, curious, rested, nodded. Even in sleep, the ocean welcomed her once more. She slipped beneath the surface like a leaf landing on still water. No splash, no surprise, just a return. The reef was behind her now, still singing its quiet songs. The sea turtle was somewhere far, still swimming softly through dreams. And Mina was floating above a current. Not fast, not wide, just steady and glowing. It was not like other currents. This one shimmered with gold, like strands of sunlight woven into the water. It flowed not forward, but inward, deeper into the ocean's heart. Mina didn't swim. She let it carry her. The current did not push. It invited. And she said yes. They passed through waters darker than night, but not frightening. Here, darkness was not empty. It was full of everything forgotten. Memories too soft for daylight. Moments that had once mattered deeply. And still did, even if no one remembered why. And then, the current slowed and laid her gently down. Before her, rising from the seafloor, was something vast. Not a building, not a reef. It looked like a field of waves frozen in glass. But as she drifted closer, she saw. Each wave was made of words, sentences, phrases, stories, written not in ink, but in shifting sand. And the current whispered, "This is the archive, where the sea keeps the stories no one finished telling." She stepped carefully between the rising shapes. Each story shimmered as she passed. One looked like a campfire flickering under glass, the final bedtime tale a grandfather never got to finish telling. Another swirled like mist, a dream a painter once had, never painted, never spoken aloud. Each one complete, in its incompleteness. And all of them remembered. Held by the sea, she placed her hand on one of the sand-formed stories. It pulsed beneath her fingers. And without warning, she was inside it. A child sat at the edge of a dock, feet dangling above the waves. They were whispering a secret to a fish. A secret about love. About fear. About leaving home and not being ready. Mina watched. No one else ever had. This memory had been waiting for an audience. Not to be judged. Not to be fixed. Just to be heard. And Mina listened. When the secret ended, the fish blinked once and swam away. And the child smiled. That was the whole story. And it was enough. Mina stepped back. The current was waiting. It flowed gently around her feet, ready to carry her further. She followed it deeper into the archive. Each story she passed sent out a feeling, a memory of laughter. A single word never spoken. A goodbye that wasn't bitter, just unfinished. She began to understand. The current didn't move water. It moved remembrance. It helped the forgotten find new homes in sleeping minds. And tonight, it had brought them to her. The final chamber was unlike the rest. It was shaped like a spiral, turning inward. And at the very center, a small circle of untouched sand. Blank. Empty. Waiting. And this time, the current whispered, "This one is yours." Mina knelt beside it. And before she could wonder what to write, her fingers moved gently through the water. Not with effort. With memory. She wasn't inventing anything. She was remembering something that had waited. a story she'd once begun, but never told. It came back, slowly. The girl who talked to shadows. The lighthouse that only lit up in dreams. The shell that let you hear the truth if you listened gently enough. She wrote it in swirls and shapes. She wrote it with pauses and breaths. She wrote it until the sand glowed. And then, she let it go. The current lifted the story, curled it into a ribbon of golden water, and carried it into the sea. To join the others. To be remembered. Mina felt no sadness. Because now she knew. Not every story must be told out loud. Some live best beneath the waves. Carried. Held. Shared only with the sea. She rose slowly from the archive. The current gathered around her again. And gently, lovingly, began to carry her back. Through the darkness. Through the glow. Through the memory. Back to the reef. Back to the dream. Back to her breath. She woke in the soft quiet of morning. And though her room was still, she felt the current in her chest. Not rushing. Just flowing. Still carrying her story. And all the ones she hadn't told yet. So if you ever feel a whisper in your sleep, a quiet tug behind your thoughts, follow it. Let it carry you inward. Let it show you the stories you didn't know you still held. Because the sea keeps everything, even the things we leave behind. And sometimes, all it takes to remember them is to close your eyes. Let the current hold you. And drift. The little starfish and the silent moon. The ocean was quiet under a sky full of stars. The waves had softened to a gentle lull, as if the whole sea was taking a deep breath before sleep. On a patch of soft sand, a small starfish named Mira lay still, her tiny arms stretched wide like the petals of a flower. Mira wasn't like the other creatures. She couldn't swim fast or glow like some fish. But she had a secret. Every night, she spoke to the moon. She didn't use words or sounds. Instead, she whispered with her thoughts, sending soft ripples of wonder into the sky. And the moon, a glowing silver lantern hanging low on the horizon, always listened. One night, Mira asked quietly, "Do you ever get lonely up there, all alone in the dark?" The moon didn't answer, but a shimmering wave brushed the shore like a gentle sigh. Mira smiled softly. She knew the moon heard her, even if it never spoke back. Every night, she shared little secrets, like why seashells sometimes sing when pressed to your ear, or why the dolphins always seem to be smiling, even in the stormiest waters. The moon stayed silent but steady, shining softly as if holding all her questions close. Then, one evening, thick clouds covered the moon, hiding its light. Mira waited patiently, whispering her thoughts in the gray shadows. No light returned. No shimmer danced on the tide. She felt small and forgotten. But the sea itself seemed to carry her whispers deeper, beneath the waves, until she found a place where moonlight still touched, a quiet, glowing patch on the ocean floor. There, beneath the water, she whispered again, "You never forgot me, did you?" Though no sound came back, the ocean glowed around her, as if the moon was holding her whispers safe. Mira understood something then. Some whispers are not for hearing out loud. They are for holding in quiet places, safe and warm, until you need them most. And as she drifted gently in the water, she knew that even the smallest voice, like hers, could shine bright, as long as someone was listening. In the beginning, the moon only watched. High above the tides, it gazed in silence. Never speaking. Never answering. Only watching. And for a long time, that was enough. But over the years, it noticed something. The sea whispered at night. Tiny thoughts. Questions. Wonders. And most of them came from a starfish. She lay on the shallow sands, just where the waves kiss the shore. And every night, she spoke her thoughts into the sky. The moon heard them all, but never replied. Not out of rudeness. It simply didn't know how. It had watched for so long, it had forgotten how to speak. Until one night, the starfish whispered, "I wonder if silence can be a kind of love." The moon paused. No one had ever said that before. And suddenly, it didn't want to just watch. It wanted to listen. So the moon began to change. Its light bent through the water, wrapping gently around the starfish. It followed the tides more closely. It noticed the shimmer of her skin, the hush between her words. And one night, it reflected back her thoughts in light. Her questions became constellations. Her wonder became glow on the tide. And her quiet heart became the moon's favorite thing to watch. The starfish smiled. She didn't need answers. She just needed someone who truly listened. And from that night on, the moon never watched the same way again. Because it had learned not how to speak, but how to be present. Fully. Lovingly. Silently. The starfish felt the moon's light wrap around her like a soft blanket, warm and quiet. For the first time, she knew the moon wasn't just watching, it was truly listening. Each night, as the tides rose and fell, the starfish shared more of her thoughts, small wonders and secret wishes she had never spoken aloud. She told the moon about the hidden colors of coral that only bloom in the moonlight. She spoke of tiny sea creatures who danced only when no one was looking. And she whispered about dreams that floated just beneath the surface, waiting to be found. The moon began to change, too. Its light no longer hung distant and cold but softened, flowing gently with the waves, shimmering through the water like a friend's quiet breath. Sometimes, when the starfish rested on the sandy shore, she would feel the moonlight pulse, a silent reply, telling her it understood. The starfish knew now that silence wasn't emptiness. It was a language, a way of being close without needing words. One night, as the sea held its breath, the starfish asked softly, "Do you ever wish you could speak?" The moon's glow flickered gently in answer. And the starfish smiled. Because she understood. Listening, truly listening, was its own kind of conversation. A kind that spoke with light, with presence, and with the quiet love that fills the space between words. The sea whispered around them, cradling this new friendship, one made not of sound but of feeling and trust. And beneath the watchful moon, the starfish felt a peace she had never known before. She closed her eyes, knowing that even in silence, she was never alone. And as sleep came softly like a wave, she carried the moon's light with her, a light that would always listen.